Now that I know that people I know watch this, it's a bit awkward for me. I'm gonna disregard that thought. This is a video for my lovely international students who want to study psychology in Australia, because I get so many emails, DMs on Instagram, comments, just asking questions that are very kind of specific for international students. And I understand why, because it's such a complex pathway. Even for domestic students, I cannot imagine how confusing it is for people in other countries. So hopefully this video kind of breaks down, demystifies the mystery of studying psychology here. But I want to disclaim that whilst I am an immigrant, so I wasn't born here, I did get my citizenship when I was like in year 6. So I have studied as a domestic student in Australia since then. So all my university degrees, like my bachelor and my master's, have been as a domestic student. So I don't fully know the ins and outs of things like visas and how that whole system works. It's very complex. So please always get additional advice before you pick something to study, and don't base it off this video, and also doing your own additional research is really important. However, my cousins are all international students, so I've definitely heard of their experience and see them go through it. I've worked with a lot of international students and a lot of my friends are international students, so I know a little bit, but I definitely don't know the whole extent of everything. I wanted to say, if you are an international student on your journey, kind of moving from your home country to Australia, I commend you for that. It is not easy, and even if you do have, say, financial support from home, it just doesn't even begin to scratch the surface on how big of a transition this is, culturally. Also, when you go to university, you figure out, hey, people actually learn differently here. I know that was the case for my cousins. The language is, still English, but like there's just different sayings and, different little things that you have to figure out. And it might take you a few years to feel fully kind of settled, but that day will come, and it just gets easier every single day. So just stick it out, find your community. And so, yeah, you'll definitely make it through, and there are people to help you. And if you do need help, just always reaching out. I know a lot of people have asked me for help for kind of things unrelated to psychology. So you're welcome to, comment below and help each other as well. But yes, I just wanted to touch on that before we get into the main part. Kind of going through the pathways of studying psychology as a bit of context, and then I'll get into some frequently asked questions. So when people tell me that they want to study psychology, I say great, it's a great profession. But I think the question that you need to be clear on is, do you want to study psychology as in the subject, or do you want to become a psychologist? Because those are two very different things. Whether you want to become a registered practicing psychologist or just kind of studying the subject. And you need to be very clear on this, because the pathways are very different. Becoming a psychologist takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time, a lot of money, particularly if you're an international student. So being really clear about that is important. But when I'm talking about the next few things, I'm talking under the assumption that you want to be a practicing psychologist, just because that's what most people have come to me with. You can certainly just study the subject, but I'm aware that people are trying to get, permanent residencies and are working towards a profession that will kind of help with that. So I don't know if psychology is like the best profession to get a PR. I have no idea about all that stuff, so you'll have to do your own research on that. But yeah, most people come to me asking questions under the assumption that they're going to become a psychologist. So with that being said, if that is your goal, this journey will take you, for all intents and purposes, I'm going to say 3 degrees and also a minimum of 6 years, given that you haven't done a bachelor's somewhere else. It will still take you a while, but not the whole 6 years. So the first degree that you need is a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree, which is 3 years long in Australia. And if your end goal is to become a psychologist, you need to make sure that you're studying an APAC accredited major. So that's basically the Australian Psychological Accreditation Council. They have a specific major that they want you to do in this undergrad degree. So just making sure you do that, because usually if you go and study a Bachelor of Psychology, that's usually fine because it's kind of built into the program. But if you pick a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts, for example, and you do a psychology major, that's not going to cut it to get into the next degree. You'll need to do an APAC accredited major. So if you're a bit confused about this, I would recommend that, if you are doing a Bachelor of Science, get in contact with a course advisor who can help you figure out what subjects you need for that APAC accredited major. That's always a really good way to go, and your university should have help with course planning and things like that. So reach out to them to help integrate that APAC accredited major into your degree. The overall goal of your bachelor's degree is to kind of catch you up on the history of psychology, a lot of fundamental basic knowledge and theories and principles, give you a little bit of practical skills, but you're not going to do that much practical stuff, and also give you kind of critical analysis skills, so you can read a paper and you can see what's like good research, what's bad research. So it's a lot of those like basic fundamental things. So the bachelor's will cost you around $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So if it's 3 years, you're looking at the $100,000 mark for international students. There are scholarships available in different universities, so it would be really good to have a look into that and see if that's something that you can qualify for. Degree or qualification that you need is your 4th year kind of degree. So you've done your 3 years, you need to do a 4th year. And so there are 3 main options. One being an honours year, which is typically kind of it's attached to your undergrad, or you have like a graduate diploma of psychology advanced or graduate diploma of professional psychology. And so you've got these 3 kind of degrees, and like what's the difference between all of those? Honestly, nothing in terms of what you actually do. So think of it like a mini PhD. It's like a mini research year, and all 3 degrees are doing the same thing. The only variations is that honours is part of undergrad, so it's slightly cheaper because it's kind of included in the undergrad amount. The graduate diplomas are postgrad degrees, and they're slightly more expensive. And what else? What's another difference? I don't remember off the top of my head, so it would be good to like compare those 2 together. But they also offer this online, so if that's kind of something that you're interested in, that could be a good idea. But you need to complete one of those 3 degrees. So whichever one kind of you get into / works for you, you'll have to do that. And that's just giving you, again, that research knowledge that you need to be what you'll hear people say, a science practitioner. So you need to be kind of a scientist and a practitioner. So it gives you those scientist skills. Oh, another really good thing to keep in mind is that the honours years are typically done full-time, whereas the graduate diplomas you could potentially also do part-time if that's something that's of interest to you. And a graduate diploma costs about $40,000. So it's really adding up. The next thing, so you've done your bachelor's and you've done your 4th year, right? So you've got 4 years behind you. Now you can actually be registered as a provisional psychologist. So you are a registered health professional, but you need to be enrolled in a master's. They're phasing out the pathway where you can just go ahead and work as a provisional psychologist, but now you need to kind of go into a master's degree to gain your general registration. So there's a variety of master's programs. You could do an endorsed area, so you could do a master's of clinical psychology, master's of psychology, the education and developmental stream, which is one that I'm doing. You could do neuro, health, community, there's a lot. And then after completing those 2 years, because a master's is typically 2 years, you will need full-time, you'll need to then apply for your general registration and you will become a generally registered psychologist, which is pretty cool. The difference between general and provisional is, the biggest difference is that when you're a provisional psychologist, you need a lot of supervision because you're completely fresh. You're new to the profession. So you need a lot of supervision and a lot of support. And there's limits to what you can do. And a general registered psychologist is able to practice and you don't need as much supervision. And what I mean by supervision is basically you meet with essentially a mentor, an older psychologist who is a board approved supervisor, and they can kind of help you with their experience, help you through certain things. If you have questions about clients, and it's always good to kind of talk to a supervisor about things, and it's strictly professional. Yeah, it's very, very important and probably where you'll do the most learning. So having a good supervisor as well is important. So now that the whole pathways situation, all that kind of contextual information is out of the way, I wanted to just answer a few frequently asked questions that I get from international students. So the first one is, I guess it's a lot, but is Australia a good place to study psychology? And the question I ask back is, do you want to live in Australia long term? Because once you get registered as a psychologist, your license is anchored to Australia, so you can't just fly anywhere and practice. And if you do, you'll have to kind of transfer your license, which I don't know how many countries you can really do that in. It's possible in the UK, but I don't think you transfer to the same level. I'm not entirely sure. So it is possible in, the UK or something, but it takes time. It's a lot of extra paperwork, which is fine, but it's just something to keep in mind. So it is a good place to study psychology. The quality of education in Australia is really good, but I can't really compare it to anything else because I've only studied here. The second question I always get is, what is the best university to study psychology? And I understand the logic behind this question. And I think a lot of people think of Australia, in the same lens as American society, but it's very, very different here. In America, you've got those Ivy League schools, and I guess our equivalent would be the GO8 universities, which I don't actually even know what that stands for. But there's 8 universities that are in the top 100 in the world, or whatever. But people don't really care what university you go to here. So as long as you have the degree, that's all that really matters. There's not really a culture of you're from X uni, we're not gonna hire you. It's not really like that. So literally go to whatever uni you get into, suits your financial position, is in a place that you'd like to live, or cost of living is something that you feel comfortable with. And I understand that people were okay, if I go to the more prestigious uni, I'll make the better connections. Not necessarily the case. Most of my connections are from different universities, and you just kind of meet people and you reach out to them, and people don't really care where, they don't care really about your grades or what university you come from. It's more about your ability to connect and be a decent human, and also be good at your job is what people care about. Not really if you got the highest grades and come from the most prestigious university. people don't really care. The last frequently asked question, because this is just getting way too long, is it hard to get in? So I'm not gonna lie, getting to the end, masters, is quite brutal. You have to get good grades in third year to get into honours, and then honours you have to do really well to get into masters. So there's like 2 points of entry that you kind of really have to work hard for, but it's definitely achievable. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly smart or anything, and I made it, so I think it's pretty achievable. If you don't get in, you know, directly, there are other pathways, but if you are an international student, keep in mind, say if you don't get into masters 1 year, like a lot of domestic students are like, oh well, I'll just work for a year, get experience, reapply. But because of the visa situation, that might be a different story. So it's kind of good to kind of keep in mind that you're going to have to apply to things twice. It's pretty competitive to get in, and particularly if you want a scholarship, it's even more competitive. You're going to have to get really good grades and have really good experience. So, yeah, knowing that there is a potential where you get to the end of honours or your graduate diploma and then you try to get into a master's and it's not, you know, maybe you're not successful the first time, you might have to take a year off, because usually there's not really mid-entry. I think in Federation University in Ballarat there is mid-entry for clinical psychology, but in a lot of the professional psychology degrees, the masters of professional have mid-entry. But yeah, you might have to wait some time before you reapply, and if that affects your visa situation, it's good to kind of think about that as well down the track. So yeah, that's, I guess, the end of everything that I want to talk about today. There's a lot more frequently asked questions from international students that I couldn't really get to today, so if this was helpful and you'd like to see like a part 2, let me know. Also, I get questions about kind of Australian culture and little tips about, you know, how to find student accommodation, like what sites to go on, how do you know if something's good, how do you know if something's a good area, like those kind of questions. If people want help with that, let me know, and I could probably make a just more general video, not super psych related. But yeah, thanks. I'm gonna try aim for 1 video a month, which didn't really do in January, but it's kind of hard because I have no storage on my laptop or my phone, so editing is like a nightmare, and I have to like edit on my phone just because I just don't have enough space, and I have like deleted everything. I just have very minimal storage on my laptop, and I can't really go out and buy another one, so it's just like frustrating trying to edit. It takes so much more effort and time than it needs to, because I have to like delete a bunch of things like every 5 seconds. So I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm gonna try to do 1 every month. We'll see how that goes. But yes, thanks, bye.